Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Astro Consciousness channel. I'm Millie, and I am here to give you a forecast for the full moon in Scorpio taking place on April 23rd. Now, in order for us to understand what this full moon is about for us, we have to take into context the climate under which this full moon is occurring under. Okay, so I'm going to take you back a little bit to the last couple of weeks. I'm going to touch on specific events and dates so that you can truly thread the story together as to why this full moon in Scorpio can tend to be intense, reveal a lot of truths, and really bring to the surface a lot of things that were buried deep, deep within. So we begin with the lunar eclipse in the sign of Libra that happened on March 25th. Okay. And the reason that we want to look to that lunar event is that that was the last moon, that was the last full moon that we experienced prior to this one. Now, that full moon in Libra was an eclipse. And that highlighted a lot of things for us around relationships, balance, whether it's personal, intimate relationships, friendships, work dynamics, the balance in our lives. How much am I giving to something and how much is that giving me in return? Do I feel like the exchange in this dynamic, whether it's a relationship or anything else in my life, actually fits who I am now? And that full moon in Libra, that lunar eclipse in Libra, I should say, really brought up a lot of things that we recognized as creating an imbalance within us and therefore an imbalance in our lives. Okay. Then we fast forward to April 8th when we had the solar eclipse in Aries, which is a new moon eclipse. From the lunar eclipse in Libra of March 25th to the solar eclipse in Aries, I don't know about you, but I noticed significant, almost overnight changes, aha moments within myself, but also the people that are around me, my clients in sessions, things landing, things coming out. I want to really stress that point because that it is the essence and the energy of eclipses, that we really do leap timelines in terms of soul lessons coming up to the forefront of our awareness in order for us to grow and evolve. Okay. The solar eclipse in Aries was very much about what did I see about the imbalance of the lunar eclipse in Libra in March, and how do I want to claim my own now? For those of you who have been following my work, you have videos on all of those events. I invite you to go back to rewatch them, listen to the themes I talk about, and pay attention to how they have unfolded in your life, okay? So that solar eclipse in Aries kind of started this domino effect of people reclaiming parts of themselves, having soul retrievals. This belongs to me. This gets to be mine. I get to be this person again, in relationships. And here's why I talk a lot about relationships. One, I think that the theme of relationship is big in everyone's life because we are in relationship to one another, whether it's romantic or not. But two, because the axes in the zodiac of Aries and Libra are directly at 180 degrees from each other in the zodiac is the axis of relationships. So it's important that you know that, because no sign in the zodiac works independently on its own. Each zodiac sign feeds on the other, but each zodiac sign also has like a buddy sign. And it's the sign that's directly opposite of it, directly 180 degrees from it. Anyway, fun astro fact tidbit, just so you know. Okay, so the solar eclipse in Aries of April 8th, I noticed a lot of different expressions with that in people. For a lot of people, it was anger. For a lot of people, it was repressed anger that finally came out. I think, and here's what I noticed too, some people were very direct in expressing that anger, and here's why, and here's what I want, and here's what I almost expect from now on. It was that level of what can be perceived as aggression, but it's only because there's a part of you that's trying to assert itself in a world that perhaps has made you feel very misunderstood in the past. And so I really want to point that part out, because that calls for us to take a look inward and ask ourselves, what am I asking another to see about me that I am not really integrating within myself? Because when we are, self-aware, when we know our faults and our gifts, and we hold them with as much love, grace, and compassion as we can, it becomes, life in itself becomes less and less triggering. The words that people say become less and less, they have less impact on us, where we don't react as much because we have an understanding of who we are. But the thing with Aries energy is that one of the themes for Aries is reactivity, is fight, it's war, it's anger, aggression. So I think that we're still working through that. And this is what leads us to the full moon in Scorpio. Okay, so when we look at the progression of the zodiac, we have to understand that each sign evolves from the previous sign. So when we start in Aries and then we get to Taurus, Taurus is an evolution of Aries. Then we get to Gemini. Gemini is an evolution of Aries and Taurus. Then we get to Cancer. Cancer is an evolution of Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and so on and so forth, okay? When we get to Libra and Scorpio, because as I mentioned a few moments ago, it's important that we look at the last lunar event that we had, particularly the full moon event that we had, which was the lunar eclipse in Libra. Libra comes before Scorpio. Now, one of the reasons that Scorpio is a sign in the zodiac that is known for its intensity and its depth and its very analytical, psychoanalytical skills and disposition is that when we look at what Libra represents, Libra is an air sign. Yes, it is very analytical, but it is also very heady. Air signs are very heady. They tend to be very much about conversation, connection with another. And in comparison to the essence and the energy of Scorpio, it can seem superficial, okay? Now, I'm gonna take a pause there. I'm not saying that Libra energy is superficial, not at all. Every single sign in the zodiac has its depth and a gift to teach the rest of the zodiac signs. But when we look at the evolution of Libra representing connection, we then move to a deeper sense of connection, to a more profound sense of connection when we get to Scorpio. Okay. And I think that's an important thing to understand, because this is exactly what this full moon in Scorpio of April 23rd is going to show us. What came up to relevance with the lunar eclipse in Libra of March 25th, that now Scorpio, the full moon in Scorpio is showing us, yeah, but it's not just that. The reason that this energy has been so triggering, has brought up so many things of the past, has brought up a lot of things about how we want to function and not in relationships. Those are the reasons that Scorpio is going to highlight. Scorpio in the zodiac, I like to think of Scorpios as like the detectives of the zodiac, the psychoanalysts of the zodiac, because it is this innate, profound feeling and sense of wanting to get to the root of something, of wanting to understand something so profoundly that just a simple connection and the surface is not enough. It is about truly understanding the motivations, the reasons of the past of why something like this would happen, the psychological reasons, the body, the nervous system reasons, of why things have unfolded in the way that they have in the last couple of weeks. And so what this full moon in Scorpio is going to feel like, yes, it is intense, but the intensity comes from the inability to unsee what we've seen. And once we have seen what we've seen about ourselves, about our shadow, about the shadow in our relationships and our connections, about the shadow of others, how do we hold that? And what does that mean for time to come? So this full moon in Scorpio doesn't necessarily end eclipse season. Eclipse seasons tend to have a time period of the new moon prior to the first eclipse and the new moon after the second or last eclipse of that season. So in this case, the new moon that we had before the lunar eclipse in Aries of March 25th was the new moon in Pisces of March 10th. And we're headed towards the new moon in Taurus of May 8th. Why does this matter? Because as we near the end of this eclipse season, on our way to that new moon in Taurus, and I don't mean to confuse you, I just want you to have a timeline to think back to and to move towards. This is the last bit of a heavy dose of truth that the full moon in Scorpio is going to bring. And I think that because Scorpio represents the shadow in all of us, and because it exists in the zodiac, and at no point in the zodiac are we meant to get rid of Scorpio, because if we do, how can we appreciate the evolution of that profound understanding of ourselves, which very much includes the shadow, before we move on to understanding the world at large? It's really interesting because I actually think that, and this isn't spoken very much about, but in my observation, and in a lot of self-inquiry, and because of the work that I do, I think it is through the deep understanding of our shadows that we are then able to work our way through them to actually then develop compassion. And we may not be there now. We may not be there now because I think there are a lot of people right now that are experiencing a bit of anger, and that anger is still very much alive. And I actually think that this full moon in Scorpio might aggravate it a little more. But my hope is that we are able to look at that and say, and ask ourselves, what am I really supposed to do with this? And am I even in a space where I can figure out what to do with it? Or do I really need to let it just be there now, understand it? And if that's where you're at, I actually think that that's a really good place to be in, because the full moon in Scorpio is going to gift us with the energy of going deep. I think that any coaching or therapy sessions that go on the week of the full moon in Scorpio are going to have some profound, profound insights, because it's almost like, oh, this is what this means. This is where this comes from. This is where this deeply rooted fear, this deeply rooted habit, this deeply rooted pattern comes from. And we have to also understand that this is happening a few days after the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus that was about, once we interrupt this pattern, we will grow and expand. I also invite you to look at that video from last week, because that's where I explained the dynamic of Jupiter and Taurus coming together. But it doesn't come without looking at some deeply rooted truths about where we've been, where we are, and where we wish to go. So let's talk about what the rulers of this full moon are doing. Scorpio in the zodiac has two rulers, and those are Pluto and Mars. Really interesting things happening. Pluto is actually creating a T-square to the sun and the moon. We have the sun in Taurus, we have the moon in Scorpio, and then at the bottom, we have Pluto in Aquarius, creating a T-square. Whenever we have a T-square, and at this point, it's even a fixed T-square, and I'll explain what that is in a second. Whenever we have a T-square, it tends to represent an aspect of great tension. So what this is telling us in the Taurus portion of our chart is this is where you get to grow in the long run if you interrupt a pattern. This is where there is a lot of potential for you to grow over the next 10 to 14 years if there is steady effort, but that steady effort really has to come from who you are now. The moon in Scorpio then highlights, and this is the shadow that keeps the Taurus part of the chart from growing and expanding. This is that pattern that needs to be interrupted in order for there to be growth. And then we get to the leg of the T, which is Pluto in Aquarius. And this is going to be transformative. Pluto is the planet of transformation. Aquarius is the sign that is concerned with a future outlook. Aquarius is the sign that is concerned with what if things are different, vastly different, especially if we have been living our lives from a space within us where we're just following a rubric, a map, a path that has been passed down to us. And so not only is Scorpio a sign of transformation in itself, but it is activated by one of its rulers, which is Pluto, which is transformation. So eclipse seasons are already about significant endings and significant new beginnings. And the cosmos said this year, and we're going to give you a very intense full moon in Scorpio close to the end of it. Fixed energy, there are 4 fixed signs in the zodiac: Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. Fixed signs in the zodiac, on the one hand, are really beautiful because they are the signs that really keep you going. They are the signs where other signs may be responsible for initiating things, for creativity, for bringing ideas to the table. But it is this fixed energy that says, okay, great. And this is how long it's going to take for us to actually get there. This is why they're called fixed signs. There is an element of fixity in those signs that keeps them going no matter what. No matter what, we move forward. So those signs can have, a lot of people can interpret those signs as being stubborn. And sure, I think that stubbornness, a degree of stubbornness is required if you are looking to change a habit, if you are looking to build something sustainable in the long run, if you are looking to really make a significant impact in your life that you know requires that level of commitment. And so when we have the potency of all of these signs connecting to one another with the sun, which represents our identity, the sun in Taurus, the sun represents our identity, who we're showing up as now after these eclipses have passed. The moon, which represents our emotional sense of safety, our self-parenting, how we feel safe in the world in Scorpio, which is pointing out it's probably this shadow that exists within you that doesn't allow you to feel safe in the world. So how do you look into that instead of running away from it? And then Pluto in Aquarius, which is saying, this is exactly what needs to be broken, detached from, in order for there to be true transformation in your life. So then we move on to the second ruler of Scorpio, which is Mars. And Mars is still in Pisces. And if you remember, Mars has been in a conjunction to Saturn in Pisces for quite some time now. But what Mars is doing is that it's getting away from its exact conjunction to Saturn. So there is still an element of, I want this to go away already. I want this to end already. I want to be on the other side of this already. I want to have the answers right now. But I honestly don't think that that's really going to begin to happen until Mars is in the sign of Aries, and there's still a little bit of time left for that. And there's a point to that. And the point is the cosmos is not letting us rush through this understanding that we very much need in order to truly be much more intentional and understand how we need to be much more intentional with how we move forward. Mars in Pisces is the invitation that instead of running outward, we run inward. We dive deeply inward and see what's happening there. Another really interesting thing that is important to keep in mind is that Mars is nearing a conjunction then to Neptune in Pisces. Okay, so here's another big astrology thing that is important for you to understand. Come the end of 2025 and into 2026, we are going to have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Pisces. This is a really big deal in the zodiac because Saturn represents structures, it represents foundations and anything solid that our lives or society has been built upon. Neptune is the dissolution of any structures that have been built upon. My point with explaining all of that to you is as Mars leaves its exact conjunction to Saturn and moves closer to its exact conjunction to Neptune, we are beginning to get an insight and a glimpse as to what in our lives is ending, what chapter of our lives is ending, what way of thinking and approaching life is ending, so that we really step up and elevate to this collective elevation of consciousness that is currently taking place. I think that the reason that this eclipse season has felt the way it has felt, which has been a wild ride, is because this isn't something that's just happening to us as individuals. That Saturn-Neptune conjunction collectively represents the ending of a lot of the structures that our society has been built on, and we are nearing the end of that. So, from a spiritual perspective, we are elevating spiritually. And the reason we have had such a visceral, physical experience with our anger, with our resentment, with memories from the past is because the cosmos is saying you really need to look at this and tie up loose ends, and you need to deal with this and understand that this is not meant to go forward with you. Neptune in Pisces is the connection in its highest expression. It's the connection to spirit. Is the connection to source. It's the connection to the unconditional divine love that exists within all of us. And so while this eclipse season, especially that solar eclipse in Aries, may have brought up a lot of anger, a lot of memories, and the thing that Pisces does in the zodiac is the remembering of, my love, sometimes not everyone is in touch with the love and the light that exists within them. Sometimes people are incapable of meeting us of where we're at because they are just not where we are at. And this is where we get to see people's difference in levels of consciousness. Now, this isn't to say that one level of consciousness is better than another, that one is high and one is low. It is just about taking a step back and observing where a person is and how they're approaching a situation in their life and where you are and how you are approaching a situation in your life, and understand if those are different levels of consciousness or not. Okay. We still have so many placements in Aries. We have Venus, Chiron, Mercury is still retrograde, obviously the North Node. We have 4 placements in the sign of Aries. which is what I think is going to add intensity to this full moon in Scorpio. Look, the gift of Scorpio in the zodiac is about the ability to look at the hard truths of life, of ourselves and our others, and of others, and hopefully get to the root of what that is and understand that it's just people not having met their light yet. When we get in touch with our light, and this can be through prayer, through meditation, through therapy, through spiritual coaching, through, just deep introspection, we understand that there is a light that exists within us that is always guiding us. It is the voice of our intuition. It is the calming that brings us to present moment, that reminds us this too shall pass. And when we are not in touch with that on a daily basis, because it is a practice, because we are human, having a very human experience that is very distracted most of the time, we are here. And so that then takes us to a different expression of Scorpio energy, which is being suspicious of everyone, which is not trusting anyone, which is harboring an immense amount of anger and resentment that is all consuming, all brewing within, and we keep it inside as if nothing is happening. That is, I can't imagine holding that much within, and I have before, and I can't imagine being in that space now. And the understanding of how much holding this, harboring such energy within can even affect your health. I think that, as I mentioned a few moments ago, the elevation of consciousness that is happening at a collective level is really showing us how love and light require an immense amount of shadow. Because I believe in the love and light that exists within me, that exists within all of us. It's what I tap into every day to guide me to the best of my ability. Not because I'm trying to be perfect or because I'm trying to come off as something I'm not, but because I know that when I don't, my head is in a million different places, and that creates anxiety, insomnia. I don't eat well. I don't sleep well. I don't exercise. It's not a good place to be in. And with that level of touching in with the light and love that exists within me, I also have to accept that I run into my shadows. And I've come to a point where when I run into those shadows of myself or with another, I can hold them differently. That doesn't mean I don't get angry. I don't get triggered. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It doesn't mean any of that. It means that I'm able to hold that and understand, oh, the shadow is also necessary. So let's dive in and see what it's showing us. Okay. So thank you all so much. I hope that this is helpful. Look, if you want more insight as to what the season means for you, go ahead and book a reading. Also, get on the waiting list for the embodied eclipse season workshop that I'm going to have. More details are to come. So get on the wait list so that you receive those details. Other than that, thank you all so much. Much, much love to you. I'll see you next week.